All right, hello, welcome. My name is Shaina. I'm an astrologer, and today we are doing, I guess technically the second video in this little Learn Astrology Course 101 free astrology course. Learn astrology by me, the person you should learn it from because I'm right and everyone else is wrong. No, I'm just kidding. I'll link the whole playlist up in the cards up here. So the first video was what is astrology? Just answering that basic question. How is it calculated? All the, little dotting your T's and crossing your I's of what astrology is. And now that hopefully you've watched that video, we're going into the second episode, which is how to read a birth chart. What is a birth chart? How to look it up? What websites I like to use? What apps I recommend or don't? And I will take you through not only how to read a table birth chart, which looks like this, but also I'll take you through how to read a circular birth chart, which looks like this. Okay, so before I get into it though, let me just get some advertising out of the way. So I sell birth chart readings on my website, shainaemily.com. I offer lots of stuff there. If you don't really want to learn all about what a birth chart is and how to read it, I can already do it. So if you are an Aries and you just want to go straight to it, I got you. You can get a reading from me again on shainaemily.com. I also have an astrology TikTok, which I have kind of started uploading on again. I think I'm going to try to keep it going. Lord knows. And I also have a personal Instagram. All right, so you are not just a sun sign, all right? You may know that you're an Aries or an Aquarius or a Capricorn or whatever it might be, but that is just the tip of the iceberg, okay? Actually, for every single planet that's in the sky that we know of, at least, the moon, Mercury, Jupiter, Neptune, Uranus, Venus, Mars, all those planets, you have your own different sign, right? So basically, what a birth chart is it's a snapshot of the sky the moment you were born. And it basically talks about who you are, why you are that way, your psychology, your destiny or your fate, your karma, why you like this, why you don't, what your parents were like. Everything about you is mapped out in your birth chart. You may find that you relate to certain aspects of your sun sign, but you don't relate to all of them. Or you might find that you relate to certain aspects of your sun sign in certain areas of your life, but you're not always like that. That's exactly what the birth chart tells you. That's exactly what the birth chart says. It says, okay, yes, your sun or your ego or your main essence, vitality, personality is this, but you're also like this emotionally. That's your moon. You're also like this in love. That's Venus. This is the karmic baggage you have coming into this lifetime. That's your Pluto, right? Like, it talks about everything, and there's so many components to a birth chart. I would like to preface this with I am a tropical Western astrologer that uses the Placidus system. If you don't know what that means because you're a super beginner, that's fine. You don't need to, but just so that you know, I will be teaching you using the Placidus system. So this is how I do astrology. This is the astrology that I like, that I took to, so that's what I'm teaching you. Now, we are all hypocritical creatures, and astrology shows just that. That's what's beautiful about astrology, is you may say, oh, how am I this, but also this? Both are true with astrology, and that's what it shows. A lot of times we don't have language to describe certain aspects of ourselves, like how can I act like this sometimes and this other times? How can this be true in this, right? That's what astrology says, and that's what I think the beauty of astrology is that it shows us how complex we are of people. The only way you can have the same birth chart as somebody is if you were born at the exact same moment, at the exact same place as somebody. And even then, there is still nature versus nurture. There is still different forms that these energies can take. This is totally going off way more than I meant to, but there's this amazing movie all about identical triplets. I can't remember the name of it, but I'll put the title of it right here. And I remember seeing this and being like, this is an amazing example of astrology, of how somebody with the same chart but taken into different environments, because they're triplets that were split up, some will thrive because their chart reacts well to that environment, while others will really struggle because their birth chart does not react well. So it'll show the more harsher or negative qualities, or you'll feel those more, whereas the others won't. Nature versus nurture is still true. Both are still true, and that's what I think astrology shows and what's so interesting and amazing about it. So the first thing is, how do I find my birth chart? How do I look up my birth chart? Because it's a snapshot of the sky the exact moment you were born. All you need is your birthday, birthplace, like the city and state, and your exact birth time. Now that's the one that, you know, sometimes people have trouble with because not everybody knows their exact birth time off the top of their head. So most of the time, especially in America, especially if you're born more recently in America, your birth certificate will say your exact birth time. Now I know not everybody has access to their birth certificate. I've had somebody call like their city or their state. I don't know exactly how they did it. You are able to order another birth certificate, a copy of your birth certificate, and most of the time it will have your time on it. And also when you're checking your time, it really is important to pay attention if it's AM or PM or if it's in like military time or like 24-hour time. I've had people think it was AM, it was actually PM, they had the wrong chart, all that sort of stuff. And if you're wondering, a few minutes can actually make a big difference. And something like an hour will make quite literally an astronomical difference. So it really is important to get your birth time exact. Now let's get into where to look up your birth chart, because there are a bunch of different websites and I don't like all of them. I don't agree with all of them. So I'm just gonna I'm not gonna go through all of them, but I'm gonna go through the main ones. The first one I'll talk about is Astro-Charts. This one I'm pretty sure, now I don't have many friends anymore, so I don't really talk to anybody. When I was talking to people like a few years ago, this seemed to be the one that like all the girlies use now. And so this is going to be the one that I'll use for the examples for the table charts, just because whenever I would get a chart sent from like a friend or something, they would always send it to me from this website. So it seems like most people are using this website, so I'm going to use this one. And honestly, I do find it to be really accurate. I do like it. It's not the one that I use, but I see why people use it. It's kind of like aesthetic, but also accurate, which is rare and I like. And that's why I'll be using it to explain the table chart today. The thing that I really don't like about it, and the reason why I don't use it personally, is because of the circle graph. You can't click on the things individually. It's not interactive, and that pisses me off. But that's just my personal preference. I should say, for this video, I am going to be using Azealia Banks's birth chart information and her birth chart as the sample. I love her. I've used Danny DeVito quite a bit, and since I've used him quite a bit, I was like, let's go to somebody new. I love Azealia Banks. She was born on my mom's birthday. Hell yeah. Here's actually her birth chart information if you want it to be interactive and you wanted to go through it with me. But obviously you can also just use your own, which I would recommend doing. So the main three things that I want you to pay attention to when you're scrolling through, looking at all this information and feeling really overwhelmed, don't look at that circle right now. Oh my God, what is that, right? Just pay attention to this first table, which is the planets, this table, which is the aspects, and then finally scroll all the way down, just ignore all that other stuff for now, and go to the houses. These three, pull up those three, take screenshots of them right now if you put in your information, and save them for a second because we're going to use those in a second. My favorite website, my godsend, my first and only true love, no I'm just kidding, is AstroTheme. I love AstroTheme with such a passion because I think they are the only people that do the circle chart correctly. And so I'm going to use this website when I teach you how to use the circle chart. I forgot to say this, but for AstroTheme, I use specific settings, and these are the settings that I use. These are the boxes that I like to check, and if you want to follow along with me, I'd recommend checking these boxes and not the ones I don't. I also really like that you're able to keep a bunch of birth profiles and it's free, and so I have everybody's birth chart that's ever given me their birth chart information since I started astrology when I was 18, so haha, if you ever gave it to me, I still have it, losers. It's extremely user-friendly, and no, it does not have the best like table chart. That's why I'm not using it, because I just don't think it looks really appealing, although it's fine, there's nothing wrong with it. And I like it for circular charts because it's interactive. See how on Astro charts I can't click through anything and specify things, and then see how on AstroTheme when I like hover through it, it just like gives me all the information I could ever want and need. So that's why I love it. But AstroTheme is definitely for intermediate or advanced astrologers, and Astro charts I think is for beginner and I guess intermediate astrologers. So next I'm going to talk about is Astro Cafe. I used to always recommend this for beginners, but now I honestly can't because their calculations are just so off, and I'm noticing it more and more. I don't know why they haven't fixed this. I honestly love the way their chart graph is set up because it's all like color coded and it's so like easy to read, and I love how they have like so many descriptions of each placement. So you can use this if you want to read about your placements and stuff, because that's how I first did it. That's how I first ever learned about my chart, was reading it on Astro Cafe. However, I've had people be like, oh my god, I put in my chart in Astro Cafe and it said that my moon was in one sign, and then on every other website it says it's in the other sign. And I'm like, ooh, yeah, that's not good. You don't want to know. You don't want to be thinking you're the wrong moon sign, right? I guess with a heavy conscience, I have to say I can't recommend this website anymore. And if you're ever confused, like Astro Cafe says one thing, other websites say another, disregard Astro Cafe every time. All right, and then I don't want this section to be like forever, but I do want to talk about my favorite app with astrology and my least favorite app. Now, I know there's a ton of apps, but this is not a video reviewing apps. So if you're looking to get an astrology app, I would recommend every time, and always have and probably always will, is Time Passages, because there's so much to read about. I remember like when I was younger and I'd be in like my acting rehearsals or whatever, and I was bored, I would always just go on my Time Passages and just read a bunch about astrology, read this, read that, and I found it like really interesting, really fun to use. I don't love it in the way that they like show the charts and stuff, but it's just really helpful, really handy. I actually really like it. I use it all the time. Now, my least favorite app, I'm sure everyone knows, I'm sure I don't have to say this, but just in case I need to, throw away CoStar, delete it right now. There's no point to it. You're not going to be able to learn astrology using CoStar. I wouldn't trust their calculations. Their charts are not charts. There's no point to it. Please don't use it. If you want to use it in your own time, fine, whatever. I get it. Your friends have it or something. I don't know. But there's just no reason to learn astrology through CoStar. It won't help you. Input it and put the information somewhere else, please. So now, hopefully you have your chart pulled up on Astro Charts or whatever website you want to use, and you have 3 graphs screenshotted. Okay, you have this one, which is the planets, the first one they show you. This one, which is aspects, the second one they show you. And then you scroll down to the bottom and you screenshotted the third one, which is the house positions. Okay, now we're going to break down what you are looking at. And not only what you're looking at, but also kind of like how to research further without knowing anything about astrology. So first we're going to pay attention to this table here. These are your planetary positions. So if you'll see in Azealia Banks' chart, the first thing it says is Sun in 9 degrees, 25 minutes, Gemini. And we'll go over what each of that little part means. But as you know, if you've ever, had somebody ask you, hey, what's your sign? You've probably said, I'm a Gemini, or I'm a Taurus, I'm a this. What you've said is your sun sign, and what you said is this first placement here. And I'm sure you're like, oh my God, there's so many. That's right, because you're such a complicated, interesting, hypocritical, talented person, right? That's what astrology says. So basically what planets represent in astrology is different aspects of your personality. So for example, Azealia Banks is a Gemini sun. She talks a lot. She talks a lot of shit. She's a rapper. She kind of has multiple personalities going on. This is all very much the traits of Gemini. But that's not the only thing she is, right? There's more things to her, just like there's more things to you, right? So if you look, her moon is in Capricorn. Moon is her emotional life. So her emotional life has the qualities and attributes of the zodiac sign Capricorn. And if you're wondering how this came to be, how is this all calculated? I've already gone over how this is all calculated in my previous video, What is Astrology? So the first thing that we're looking at is the planets. The second thing we're looking at is the sign that planet falls in at the time of your birth. So her emotional life shows that of Capricorn traits. And then you have Mercury in Taurus, Venus in Cancer, all these other aspects of her personality. Now I'm going to do a whole video about the 12 zodiac signs. That's actually going to be the video that's next in the series after this one. And I'm also going to do a video all about the planets in astrology. But if you don't know anything about anything in astrology, that's okay. You don't need to. All you have to be able to read is Venus in Cancer. And so all you have to do is go online and search Venus in Cancer. Go on TikTok, go on YouTube, go on Google, and I promise you there's going to be so many things and people and all that sort of stuff, blogs explaining it for you. Now, something that I will say that's really important to note is that not all planets are created equal, I guess I'll say. Or what I should say is, different planets have a different impact on your personality. Basically, there's different groupings of planets. So the best way to start out with learning about yourself is to research the personal planets. The reason why these are called personal planets is because they move the fastest throughout the zodiac signs, and they're most personal to you. They're how you act, your personality, and how you impact the world around you. So anything from the sun through Mars, so sun, moon, Mercury, Venus, and Mars are your personal planets. These 5 are the best to start with searching. Jupiter and Saturn are what's called social planets. They move decently quickly throughout the signs, but not fast enough to where basically everybody within your same school year will probably have the same sign in Jupiter or Saturn as you do, but the people outside your grades will probably be a little bit different. So they're social planets. While these are very relevant to you and still affect you, they're not personal to you, right? They're kind of more about your year, your vibe, and how that's impacted you. And then we go to even farther and slower moving planets, because every planet moves at a different speed around the sun, right? Which you would know if you watched my last video, right? And Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto are planets that move very, very slowly. So you know how we have boomers, Gen X, millennials, Gen Z, and Gen Alpha? All of those generations are categorized by generational planets, by what zodiac sign their Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto are in. So you can know somebody's generation by looking at these 3 placements. So for example, Azealia Banks is a Uranus and Neptune in Capricorn, and she is a Pluto in Scorpio. These are millennial placements. She was born in 1991. She is a true millennial. So if you were to look up something like Uranus and Capricorn, this would be speaking more to your generation and how the outside world affected you rather than how personal planets are how you affect the world. So that's a big thing to note when looking up your chart. You know, just saying, oh, I have a planet in Scorpio because my Pluto's in Scorpio. Well, you do have a planet in Scorpio. That's very valid, but it's going to impact you less and a little bit differently than if you were to have your moon in Scorpio. If you were to have your moon in Scorpio, that would be a very highly Scorpionic person, whereas just somebody with a Pluto in Scorpio is more speaking to a greater generation and how the outside world affected you. Now, you'll see there's the North Node and Chiron. These are asteroids. These are other points that they're talking about. You can look those up again. We won't talk about those today. And then that also shows the ascendant and midheaven. You're able to do the same thing. You can look it up. Now, if anybody's ever asked you what's your sun, moon, and rising, because that's something that is gaining a lot of popularity, or what's your big 3, basically what they're asking you is your sun sign, your moon sign, and your ascendant sign. The ascendant sign goes by a lot of different terms. It can be called the ascendant, the rising, or the first house. It's also abbreviated as AC or ASC. I'll just quickly go through what sun, moon, rising means. It basically talks about your 3 main layers of your personality, right? There's the rising sign, which is how you come across, how you look, how you approach the world. It has a lot to do with how you dress yourself, your facial features, all that sort of stuff. Your sun sign, everyone knows your sun. This is like your main personality. This is like your second layer. You show this off to people naturally. This is just your general vibe. And then you have your moon sign. I love learning about people's moons. I think that a lot of times I see people more as their moon sign than their sun sign. But the moon sign is your innermost layer. It's who you are when no one's watching. It's the part of you that you only show to the people closest to you. It's your emotional life. The sun is what you want, but the moon is what you need. And the rising is kind of like what people give you and like what people expect of you, right? When push comes to shove, you're always gonna pick and favor your moon sign because you can't outright it, okay? This is what you need from life, right? So it's like the rising, the sun, and the moon is kind of how I think about it. Okay, so now you're probably wondering, okay, there's a bunch of like little numbers by these things. Like before it says Gemini, it says 9 degrees, 25 minutes. That is degrees. Basically, if again, you have watched my previous video, you'll know that the 12 signs equal 360 degrees of a circle, and each of the 12 signs is split up evenly with 30 degrees containing within each sign. So you have anywhere from 0 degrees of that sign to 29 degrees of that sign. So no, I would not recommend searching sun at 9 degrees in Gemini. That's not really the thing to search, but it is good to know. If you're just wondering, it's really easy to look, and it kind of has to do with maturity. So basically, if you're a really early degree, that sign is really immature. It's much more pure. It's much more curious, wide-eyed, bushy-tailed, all that sort of stuff, and much more impulsive. If it's the middle of the sign, this is really sat in. It's for sure this sign. You know, it's been this sign, it is this sign. This is how it's going to be. When it's at the end of the sign, it's like wiser, more mature. It thinks about its actions a little bit more. It's almost like a little bit more predictable. It knows itself a little bit more. It makes less impulsive decisions. Now, it doesn't mean that it's bad if it's immature. It doesn't mean that it's good if it's mature, because, you know, there's shitty things about old people and there's great things about young people. You know, there's a lot more youthful essence and energy to an early sign. It's much more curious than a later degree sign might be. It's like, let's look at Azealia Banks's chart. Her lowest degree is her Mars. I think that is incredibly predictable. If you know anything about Azealia Banks, you know that she pops off at everyone. I also have a low degree Mars. It's at 1, so that might be why I like her. You know, she pops off at everyone. She's very responsive, very reactive. She's incredibly just like an early degree Mars in Leo. But if you look at one of her later degree placements, it's her Mercury. Now, her Mercury isn't her latest degree placement, but it makes sense that her Mercury in Taurus is at a later degree, as she is a very honed and professional rapper. When you're actually looking at her talent, when you're actually looking at her singing, I think we all agree that she's very good at what she does, and she's very professional at that. She may not be professional in her argumentative, you know, clap back sphere, but she is very professional in the things that she puts out, and she puts out quality work, in my opinion, but you know what I'm trying to say. Now, the next thing to pay attention when looking at this graph is if there are any R's, right? You see the little R in parentheses. Not everybody has one. You might have no placements at all that have the little R in parentheses. That's fine. Basically, what this means is that this planet is retrograde. Now, I'm sure we have all heard of Mercury retrograde. Now, all the planets go retrograde except for the sun and the moon. The ascendant and the rising also do not go retrograde. Just Mercury through Pluto can all go retrograde. So you'll see that she has her Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto all retrograde. The outer planets spend a lot of time in retrograde, so it makes a lot of sense that she has them. Mercury, Venus, and Mars are actually quite a lot less likely to have retrograde, so those are ones to really pay attention to when you do have them retrograde. Basically, retrograde just means that from where we're standing in the Earth, that the planet appears to be moving backwards. Now, the planet isn't actually moving backwards. In the ecliptic, that's impossible, but it basically has to do with that the way that it appears and the way that the other things are moving and the way that we're moving and the speed goes is that it looks like it's going backwards. So basically, whatever planet, if you have any planets that are retrograde, what that means is that it's turned inward. Azealia Banks doesn't have this, but it's really easy to use something like Mars retrograde. If you have a Mars retrograde in your chart, that means it's very obvious that Azealia Banks does not have this. It's very obvious her anger and her assertiveness is expressed very outwardly and expressed very externally, right? But if you have Mars retrograde in your chart, that would mean that your anger and your, sometimes even your self-expression, your passion, your vitality, all that sort of stuff is turned inward. Only you get to see it. You probably have a lot of repressed anger. You probably hold a lot of your anger and tension inside that might even result in health problems. You probably are very, very good at arguing and doing debates, but only in your head or when you plan it and write it out. You might not do as well in the moment, right? Whereas Mars direct would do really well in the moment, but they might not be the best at articulating themselves in a written way or in a really thought out way. They might just be better at blasting it off in the moment, right? Retrograde planets are very reflective and are very internalized. Stelliums. So if you look up your chart, I'm going to use my chart because Azealia Banks does not have a prominent enough stellium that I don't want to use her chart. But if you look at my chart, off the bat, you will see a bunch of Capricorn planets. You know, anybody can look at this visually and be like, this bitch has a lot of Capricorn. Okay, I have 5 Capricorn planets, and you'll notice that 3 of them are personal Capricorn planets, okay? So this is what's called a stellium. There's a debate around how many planets equals a stellium and how many planets is in a stellium. I would say personally, you have to have 4 or more planets in a sign to be considered a stellium. Now, if you have 3 personal planets, which are again the sun through Mars in one energy, I would consider that a stellium, but that's not too uncommon, but it's still relevant. But if you have like Uranus and Neptune in Capricorn and you're a millennial and then you have your Venus in Capricorn, I honestly wouldn't really consider that a stellium. But again, I've seen stelliums of 7 planets in Capricorn before, okay? So there are some crazy stelliums out there. And basically all that means is that this energy is prominent as fuck in your life and prominent as fuck in your chart. And it plays a big role and it's really heavy and weighted. And so for example, when I was younger and didn't know anything about astrology and looked up the sign of Capricorn, I have very vivid memories of just looking up Capricorn and being like, hell yeah, that's fucking me. There's no way I'm not. And that's because I have so many fucking planets in Capricorn that of course I'm gonna heavily relate to it. The next thing to talk about is that planets cannot be in multiple signs. So let's quickly talk about cusps. The great thing when you look up your birth chart is that it's going to confirm what your sun sign is. Like I remember recently somebody was telling me that, oh, I think I'm a Leo, but I'm a cusp and I've always felt like I related to Cancer. And when I looked up their chart, because again, if you watched my last video, it explains why the placements move a little bit because our calendar is not aligned with the astrological calendar. So the zodiac sign that the sun is in changes a little bit depending on the year. So sometimes if you were to look up January 19th or January 20th or January 21st, it might say you're an Aquarius when you're really a Capricorn or vice versa. So like when I looked up this guy's chart, he was like a 28-degree Cancer, which that is a Cancer. He is a Cancer sun. And when I told him that, he was like, that's actually kind of a relief because I really didn't get the whole Leo thing with me. I always felt like a Cancer, and that is why. If you're 2 degrees Taurus sun, for example, your sun is in Taurus. I do not consider that a cusp. That is where that placement is. It cannot be in 2 signs. However, and this is kind of controversial and not everybody will agree with me that's an astrologer, but that's okay. You can decide how you want to on this. I consider 0 degrees to be a cusp. So if you are like a 0 degrees Taurus, I do consider you a Taurus Aries cusp. Because 0 degrees is like a funnel. There's a little bit of the previous sign and a lot of the sign after it, and it does kind of merge itself. Cusps don't only exist for sun signs. You can be a 0 degrees Mars and Leo, and that would be cusping Leo and Cancer, which Cancer is a sign before Leo. Which, by the way, let me put a list of the order of the zodiac signs right here. It's really important to know this. Here it is if you want to screenshot it. It plays a big role. There is so much more to learn about planets, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. And someday again, I'll do a whole video about it, and if I ever remember, I'll link it here. But let's move on to the next graph. And we're actually going to skip that second graph of aspects and scroll all the way down to Astro Dash charts and go to the house table. So, just like you, every planet needs a home. We all need a place to live. We all need a happy and healthy home. And so do the planets. The planets all have to live somewhere, right? And those are the houses. There are 12 houses in astrology, and that reflects the 12 zodiac signs. Again, remember how I just said it's really important to know the order of the zodiac signs? Here's the order of the zodiac signs. Well, the order of the houses, which are 1 through 12, reflect the order of the zodiac signs. So the first house reflects Aries, the second house reflects Taurus, the 8th house reflects Scorpio, the 12th house reflects Pisces, all that sort of stuff. It's super intuitive. So if you know the energy of the 12 zodiac signs, you can kind of understand the energy of the houses. Now, they're a little bit different. While the planets represent a part of our personality, and while the zodiac signs represent the flavor of the planet and how that planet is expressed, the houses represent the area of life that that planet is expressed through, okay? So for example, you may be an Aries sun, but let's say if it says, and I really do like astro charts here because it does say which planets are in what houses really, really easily. So let's say it says house 6 is in Aries and it contains your sun. Yes, you are an Aries sun. You're very, abrasive to the point and assertive, but where is that assertiveness channeled? It's channeled in the 6th house of daily work and daily habits and routines. So that is where you focus this Aries energy into. You focus your assertiveness into your daily routine. You focus your assertiveness into your habits, right? And basically astrology is just kind of lining up each like that, very intuitive. So in this house graph, it's really, really easy to see which planet is contained in what house. So for example, if you're wanting more stuff to search, like let's use Azealia Banks's chart, you see it says first house starts at Taurus and it says containing sun. So if I were her, I would search first house sun and it would tell me a bunch of stuff about that. Let's see where her Mars is at. Okay, it says third house starts at Cancer and it says contains Venus, Mars, and Chiron. So I would search third house Mars and then that would tell me a lot about her Mars. So now let's talk about what does this mean? First house starts at blah, 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 Taurus. First house, second house starts at blah, 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 Gemini. So this is your house cusp ruler. As I mentioned, each of the 12 houses talk about 12 different areas of life. Again, this is too much to talk about in just the same video. And basically, this shows you, for example, your first house is your rising sign, your ascendant, how you come across. So it presents your identity. So your identity has a lot to do with the qualities of Taurus because that is that house cusp ruler. Basically, it'll make more sense when we're looking at the circular chart. But what that means is that whatever zodiac sign that house starts at, which is what it lists here, that is the house cusp ruler, and that shows you the energy of that area of life that either you received or you put out there or you show. So for example, her 6th house is in Libra. So in the area of life that is the 6th house, which is your daily life, work, and routines, she was shown a very Libra approach to it, and that's how she approaches it, is very Libra. So she tries to find a lot of harmony and balance in her daily work and life and routine. You will notice in Azealia Banks's chart that all 12 of the zodiac signs are ruling one house. So if you look for Aries, oh, there it is. Aries rules the 12th house. If you look for Gemini, oh, there it is. Gemini rules the 2nd house. So this is a very traditional house rulership. Now, let's take Danny DeVito's chart now. If we look at his houses, you will see that he has Gemini and Sagittarius ruling 2 houses. And you'll notice that he has Capricorn and Cancer not ruling anything. These don't show up at all. Now, this is what's called an interception. Because he does not have Capricorn and Cancer ruling any of his houses, he has a Capricorn and Cancer interception. And he has Gemini Sagittarius doubles. Now, this is another thing that you can look up. Again, not everybody has an interception. Azealia Banks does not have one. It's more rare to have one, and it is an important thing to note. Now, even though he does not have Capricorn ruling any of his houses, he does have his Venus in Capricorn. This is still relevant. He still has a Venus in Capricorn. He still has a Saturn in Cancer. However, these planets are intercepted. Now, this is not a video about interceptions because, again, that is a whole other topic in itself. But it is really nice to know, again, to look up. So we can look Venus interception up, Saturn interception up, Cancer interception, double Gemini Sagittarius, all that sort of stuff, right? Just to learn more about himself. Now, this is something to note. This is something to bookmark. And when you understand more about astrology, you can look more into it. But yes, interceptions are a thing. Not everybody has them. And that is how you find one. If there are any signs missing in your house cusp rulers, you have an interception. If you can find every single one of the 12 zodiac signs ruling a house, you do not have one. Now, just like how there are planetary stelliums, there are also house stelliums. So you might not have a planetary stellium, but oh my God, you have a shit ton of planets in one house, even though they're in different signs. So that house is a major focus to you, that area of life. For example, these 2 people do not have house stelliums. So I'm sorry, I have to take my chart. My chart is just so obvious when it comes to stelliums. It's just so easy to use. And you can look at this thing and say, yeah, she's got a 7th house stellium. The 7th house is the house of the other, the house of relationships. So it makes sense that I like astrology. Astrology is all about why we do the things you do. Why do you do the things you do? Of course, I love astrology. I'm really obsessed with why people do the things they do. right? Now, house stelliums I consider a little different than planetary stelliums. It doesn't matter if you only have generational planets in a house. If you've got if you've got Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune all in the same house, that is a stellium, okay? When you're looking at generational planets, it's honestly so much more relevant to look at the house that it's in than the sign, because again, the sign is relevant to everybody else in your generation, but the house is very personal to you.
I cannot believe I mentioned this nowhere in the video, but basically the reason why you need your exact birth time is because that's how it finds the houses. Okay, so that's why it's so special to you what your houses are and like where your planets are located, because that is what is determined by your exact birth time. And if you have a birth time that's like 20 minutes off, your planets can be in different houses, and that's confusing, okay?
Now, there are some houses that are more important or more prominent than others, and this is the angular houses. That's what they're called. This is the first house, which is also called the rising, the ascendant, or the first house. There's the descendant, which is opposite the first house. That's the seventh house. Your descendant sign is your other relationship. And then there's the fourth house, which is also called the IC, or the nadir, I think is how you say it. This is the house of home. This is the lowest point in your chart, so it's the most personal house to you. That is a very prominent sign. I kind of find that I more than likely will guess somebody's fourth house than I will their rising, because your fourth house is really who you are when you take your bra off and you come home. And then your 10th house is the highest point of your chart. This is your midheaven, also labeled as the MC, again, also labeled as the 10th house. This is your public persona, your work life, and your career. Now, there's more that goes into it, but those are 4 really prominent houses. And so if you have any planets in those houses, they are kind of more central or more focused, or you interact with them more. Now, let's go on to aspects, the final table that we're going to talk about. Now, again, I really do not like how this aspect table is set up on astro charts, because it's just kind of confusing and hard for me to look at. So we are actually going to look at the way that Astro Theme sets up their aspect table, but you can look at whatever website you want. I have a whole video already up about aspects. I kind of went out of order for this one. I did that because I have an aspect series going and I kind of wanted to talk about what aspects are. So if you're wanting to know more and all about aspects, I already have that up. The video's right here, and I will reference this quite a bit. So we're just going to quickly talk about aspects. So aspects are basically what meld everything together. You have the planets, you have the signs, and you have the house positions, and how those talk to each other and the conversations they have with each other are your aspects. Aspects are basically conversations between the planets, and they reflect the conversations you have within yourself. So if you're ever like, why is it that this one part of my personality and this other part of my personality are so hard to get to work together? That probably means you have a harsh aspect between those 2 planets. But if you're also like, oh my God, this is so easy for me, this works so well with this, why can't people figure this stuff out? It's literally so easy. That's a positive aspect. These are calculated by degrees. And again, I go into what all the different aspects are, what they mean, how to calculate them, all that sort of stuff in the video. So we're just rushing through it here. Some aspects are considered more positive and other aspects are considered more negative, but please don't have such a staunch black and white view of aspects like that, because there are good things to the negative or more disharmonious aspects, and there are bad things to the positive or more harmonious aspects. Sometimes too much of a good thing can be a bad thing. Sometimes constantly reinforcing negative behavior, because that's what good aspects can do. Say, yeah, this is fine that you keep doing this bad behavior. That can be bad. And sometimes it's really good to have a more, not very, I guess, like positive planetary placement or house position have a bad aspect, because it can make you check yourself. It's also really helpful to get an idea of how healthy versus unhealthy a planet is. So let's go to this idea that somebody really doesn't relate to their sun sign. They're like, dude, I'm a Cancer, but I just don't feel like I'm a Cancer at all. I feel like I act so differently to a Cancer. That might be because only your sun is in Cancer and you have no other planets in Cancer. And that also might be because that Cancer sun is really poorly aspected. And there's a stellium of Aries planets squaring or making a disharmonious aspect with it that's constantly being like, hey, don't be a fucking little bitch. Don't be a little fucking Cancer. Get up and keep going, right? So you're like, every time I act like a crybaby, or every time I act like I'm whiny, or anytime I try to rely on somebody, the world goes, no, you can't do that. You got to get your ass up in gear and be an Aries, right? So it's really important to look at how healthy or how harmonious a planet is versus how disharmonious a planet is. Also, if you don't like one of your placements, if you go, oh, I don't like this placement, that's probably because that planet is poorly or harshly aspected. Now, if you're wanting to know, oh my God, now if you're looking at your aspect table and you're like, there are so many, like, where do I even get started? How do I even look at this, right? It can be a little bit overwhelming. The best place to look is the aspects with a tight orb. So as I mentioned, every planet has a degree. And as I mentioned, aspects are calculated by mathematical degrees of a circle. The aspects that are really good to pay attention to first, if you're getting into astrology, you're wanting to know your most prominent or important aspects. These will be the aspects with the lowest degree orb separation. Azealia Banks doesn't actually have that many aspects with a tight orb. So let's go back to Danny DeVito's chart. You will see if you look at conjunctions, his sun is conjunct his Mars and it is at a 0 degree orb. 0 degrees, 51 minutes. Now, anything with anywhere between a 0 to a 1 degree orb, this is prominent as fuck. So a great place for Danny DeVito to start looking at aspects would be Sun conjunct Mars, especially because this is a personal planet, the sun, conjunct another personal planet, Mars, at a super tight orb. So this is like framework. This aspect is framework for his personality. He will relate highly, highly, highly to this aspect. Now, if we look at a different aspect like Venus opposite Saturn, this has a very wide orb of 8 degrees. Now, is it still relevant? Yes, it's still relevant. He still has it, but it does not play out as much in his day-to-day life and does not affect him as much, as prominently as the Sun conjunct Mars aspect. Now, if you're interested, if I have already spoken about an aspect that you have, it's especially relevant if I've spoken about an aspect that you have in a 0 to 1 degree orb, check out this playlist. This is my aspect series. This will have a playlist of all of the aspects I've talked about so far. I love aspects. I love them. They are basically, in my opinion, kind of what you go to an astrologer for. Like, let's take Azealia Banks' chart, for example. You can look up Sun in Gemini. You can look up Jupiter in the 4th house, but it's really hard to look up Sun in Gemini in the 1st house, sextile Jupiter in Leo in the 4th house. That's what astrologers will do for you during a birth chart reading. They're basically looking at your aspects, how all the energies talk to each other, intuitively basically dissecting your chart. And when you get a reading, they'll probably, at least if you get a reading from me, a lot of what I'll talk to you is how your aspects play out and how everything talks to each other and makes a full person. So again, if you want a reading, it's ShainaEmily.com. All right, now that we've talked about kind of like the main graphs that you're looking at when you're first getting into a birth chart, you know quite a bit now. Honestly, if you're this far in the video, you might even know more than your friends that say they're astrologers. Like, let's be real. You know quite a bit. So now let's talk about how is a birth chart calculated. Again, this is mostly talked about in my first video. However, I did not discuss how the rising sign is calculated. And what we're going to talk about after this is how to dissect and how to read a circular birth chart. So here is the beautiful Miss Azealia Banks's circular birth chart. Okay, basically it kind of looks like a clock. It's like your own personal zodiac wheel. So this line is like the horizon line at the sky the moment you were born. The birth chart, it moves like a wheel. It moves around like a dial throughout the 12 signs. So as the day goes on, as time goes on, it moves downward. So for example, like let's take Azealia Banks' chart. This is it at 4:49 a.m. This is it at 5:49 a.m. This is it at 6:49 a.m. You see it kind of moves down, right? The rising sign is the zodiac sign that was rising on the eastern horizon the moment you were born, aka the sign at the eastern point of the celestial longitude. If you watched my last video, you probably will understand what I'm saying. Now, this is where the different house systems come in. I use the Placidus system. Because each house is proportioned according to the amount of time the signs spend on the horizon from the perspective of Earth, this results in houses of unequal size in the Placidus system. And the further you are from the equator, the greater distortion of house sizes you have. So for example, somebody in Iceland will probably have like double interceptions, which means there's a very high likelihood that you have 4 signs or more or less that don't rule a house, and you have like double doubles or triple doubles or something like that. Whereas if you're born like somewhere in America, you're more likely, that's why I said you're more likely to not have an interception or only have a single interception. Like I have an interception. I don't think I've ever seen anyone born in America that has a double interception.
Okay, all interceptions always include at least 2 signs, and they're always the opposite sign. So if you have 1 sign intercepted, that's impossible. You always have 2 signs intercepted. So what a double interception means is not 2 signs intercepted, but 4 signs intercepted, okay? Having 2 signs intercepted is just a single interception.
So basically the rising sign is just the sign that is dawning at your birth time, aka the dawning of you. Now let's go into how to read a circular birth chart. This may seem really daunting, but I promise if you've already watched this video and my previous video, it'll be easier to read than you expect. So let's break it down piece by piece. I'm going to look at AstroTheme for this because AstroTheme is literally the only website that I can even stand to look at their circular chart. So first, we're going to pay attention to the planets. So the planets are these little color-coded symbols that kind of jet off outside the circular chart. So it's really helpful to know the glyphs. And if you don't know the glyphs, that's fine. Here is what the glyphs look like. So first, let's look for Azealia Banks' sun. So when you look at her chart, here is the sun glyph in her chart. So this is her sun sign. This is where her sun sign falls in her chart. When you look at a chart like this, you kind of start to realize how almost like insignificant the sun is, or how insignificant each placement is, and how important like it is to the greater whole. Does that make sense? Like it kind of like when people only pay attention to sun sign astrology, you're like, really? You're only paying attention to sun sign astrology? There's like a trillion other things going on here, you know? You'll notice that just outside the glyph of the sun is a little number. It says 9 degrees, 25 minutes. So this aligns with the fact that when we look at her planetary table chart, you know, it says sun in Gemini at 9 degrees, 25 minutes. We see the sun is at 9 degrees, 25 minutes. Now, I love AstroTheme because it's like color coded. So now we're gonna look for a little orange line. You see that orange line points to this glyph right here. Okay, so on this inner wheel, this is the 12 zodiac signs. These 12 zodiac signs are always going to be in order. It's always going to go from Aries to Pisces. Now, that doesn't mean that Aries is always going to be at the ascendant point in your chart, or else everybody would be an Aries rising. No, that's not true. You will see that Azealia Banks' Aries glyph is right here. However, you'll notice after it is the second sign of Taurus, then the third sign of Gemini, the fourth sign of Cancer, all the way to the 12th sign of Pisces. So it always goes in this order. You will never, ever, ever see a circular chart that says Aries and then Pisces and then Gemini and then Capricorn. No, that does not exist. It will always go in this order because it's a snapshot of the sky, and that's the order of the signs in the sky, okay? So when we look at Azealia Banks' sun, again, this is the glyph. The degrees is 9 degrees, and then you see this little arrow pointing to the glyph of Gemini. So you can say Azealia Banks' sun is at 9 degrees Gemini. Now let's test you. Where is her moon at? You're right. I don't know if you're right or not, but her moon is at 10 degrees, 53 minutes Capricorn. Now, you will see some like little gray symbols. These are asteroids. You do not need to pay attention to these if you're a beginner astrologer. Just pay attention to the really vibrant, bright planetary glyphs that are staring you in the face, okay? Now, the reason why I love AstroTheme is because if things are unclear, you don't have to do any of this. You don't have to, oh, what's this glyph? Oh, I don't know. All you have to do is hover over the goddamn planet. So for example, I'm hovering over her Jupiter, and it says right here her Jupiter is at 8 degrees Leo. That is like the #1 reason why I love AstroTheme so much. I do not know of any other website that does this. And it just makes it so much easier and so much clearer to read. Because like for example, her Mars is like a little bit unclear, kind of hard to tell where it is. But if I just hover over it, it says right there, it says Mars at 2 degrees Leo, right? Now to be able to know if something's retrograde or not, also really easy. We can see, like, let's take her Mars again. Her Mars does not have a little R by it. It is direct. But like, let's take her Pluto, for example. We see that little R by it. That means it's retrograde. We see that little R by Uranus. That means it's retrograde. And again, if you hover over the energy, you see a little backwards R, which I love drawing backwards R's. It's so satisfying. Now, where is the rising sign? Again, it's always at the eastern horizon. With Placidus, the midheaven can be at different parts of the chart. Like, yes, it's at the top of the chart, but it's kind of like slanted to the right at Azealia Banks's chart, you know? But the ascendant sign will always be at the eastern horizon, and the descendant sign will always be at the western horizon. So if you were looking, what's my rising sign? In astro theme, it's labeled by the AC. And then you see this big arrow pointing to the sign of Taurus, and then you see the degrees being at 26 degrees. So it's really easy to tell when you look at the circular birth chart. Azealia Banks is a Taurus rising, Gemini sun, Capricorn moon. It's such a good combination. I think I love that combination, but I might be biased. What's crazy is that my mom and Azealia Banks were born on the same day, and they're both actually Gemini sun, Capricorn moons. That's rare. It rarely ever happens to be that way. It's just by chance that happened. They're born way different years, as you would expect. So the ascendant sign always starts off the first house, and then the rest of the houses go in a counterclockwise motion all the way in the 12th. So you'll see this has a little number 1. That means that contains all of our first house. That is a little number 2. That contains all of our second house. There's a little number 3 that contains all of our third house, and so on and so forth. Just like how the zodiac signs, even if they don't start at Aries at the ascendant, they're always in order. House 1's always there, house 2's always there, house 3's always next, and house 4, it goes in order. It's very intuitive. Again, the big MC, that's the midheaven, that's the 10th house, your public persona. The big arrow down here is the IC, the nadir, like I said, the 4th house, your home. And then the descendant sign is this big arrow here that represents the 7th house. So those little arrows represent the house cusp rulers. If you want to search second house in Gemini, that means you have like a Gemini flare and how your second house is shown, right? The house cusp rulers represent the energy of that area of life that you were shown and that you display. Where the arrow starts is your house cusp ruler. Okay? Now, just because a house is ruled by that sign does not mean that that house only contains that sign. This is really obvious to see immediately with Azealia Banks's chart because she has a late degree, Taurus rising. Out of the 30 degrees of Taurus, her rising starts at 26 degrees. So you will see that most of her first house is contained with Gemini. So that is why you will notice her sun is in Gemini, and you see that little arrow, it's within the first house. So even though her second house is ruled by Gemini, that does not mean her Gemini sun is in the second house. That does not mean that at all. And the way that you know this is because her second house starts at 21 degrees, 48 minutes Gemini. Her sun is at 9 degrees, 25 minutes Gemini. Now, 9 degrees is less than 21 degrees. Whenever a planet is less, it's just math, it's just lesser than, the house cusp ruler of that same zodiac sign, that planet falls into the house before it. So there's no way that her sun in Gemini can ever fall in the house after it. There's no way, like you'll see, that her third house is encompassed by pretty much only Cancer. There's no way her Gemini sun's gonna be in the house after it. However, her Gemini sun is not in the Gemini ruled house of the second house. It's in the first house ruled by Taurus. So again, we are very unique and complex beings. We are hypocritical people. We are complex people. There's a lot of things to take into play when learning about astrology, when learning about your birth chart. There's so much stuff to learn. And Placidus, I think, really shows that. Because having a Taurus rising with a Taurus sun in the first house, she'd be a lot more chill. That would show itself a lot differently than being a Taurus rising with a Gemini sun in the first house. This is why she's so bold. This is why she's so outspoken. This is why she is like the stereotypical Gemini, because her sun is in her first house. It's displayed in her rising, right? It's shown off the bat, okay? And it makes her Taurus rising even more hard-headed. So now let's go to Danny DeVito's chart. When you have an interception, it can be kind of harder to understand where a planet falls. You might be confused because Danny DeVito has no house ruled by Capricorn, so where does his Venus in Capricorn go? This is why it's really helpful to just look at a circular chart, and also really helpful to know the order of the zodiac signs. because you'll see Danny DeVito has a late degree Sagittarius rising. Is it at 26 degrees too? It is. There must be something to me and 26 degrees. I don't know. So even though he has Sagittarius ruling his first house, all of Capricorn is contained within his first house. So any planet that would be in Capricorn would be only in his first house. So that is how his Venus in Capricorn falls in his first house. You will notice that he has 2 houses ruled by Sagittarius, okay? His moon does not fall in both houses because they're ruled by Sagittarius. Like when I first found out about astrology, I was like, oh, my Uranus falls in both my 8th house and my 9th house because both are ruled by Aquarius. No, my Uranus only falls into my 8th house. And that is because of degrees. If you look at his degrees, let's take his Mercury is at 10 degrees Sagittarius. So his 12th house is ruled by 6 degrees Sagittarius. His first house is ruled by 26 degrees Sagittarius. If his Mercury was later than 26 degrees, if it was 28 degrees, it would fall into his first house. But because his Mercury is after 6 degrees, but before 26 degrees, it's at 10, it falls into his 12th house. This is kind of harder, I think, to calculate when you're looking at the graph. And I think it's just really easy to see when you're looking at a circular chart. Like when you're looking at a circular chart, it's obvious his Mercury points to the little number 12, and it's in his 12th house. This is why paying attention to degrees is so important. So now we know on the very outermost part of the circular chart are the planets. The little numbers outside of the circle are the houses. The glyphs inside the circle are the signs. And then what the hell are all these little lines in the middle here? These are aspects, my one true love of aspects. It is great to look at a circular chart because I just feel like it's like a snapshot. You get an instant picture of the person, how harmonious versus how disharmonious they are. It kind of can show how hard versus how easy their life was too, like really quickly, just by looking at the aspects. Azealia Banks has a pretty good combination of harsh and easy aspects. She's got a lot of natural talent, but she is definitely not short on her strifes and issues in her life, okay? I would say her chart is pretty easily proportioned between positive and negative aspects. Basically, in astro theme, the blue lines are harmonious, the red lines are disharmonious, the little green circles are conjunctions, those are considered neutral. Again, if you want to know more about aspects, check out my video. The aspects again correspond to this table here. Now, again, another reason why I love astro theme, and it is my one true astrology website love, is because you can sort the aspects by planet, which no other fucking website you can do, which is so fucking dumb. So fucking dumb, okay? So dumb. Like you can look at how healthy or how unhealthy or how harmonious or unharmonious a planet is just by hovering over it. Her Uranus, healthy, harmonious. Her Mars, it's having problems. This is a problem area in her chart. Her Pluto, a little bit of both, right? It's just easy to look at it and just kind of see immediately. Like, for example, I'm gonna find some chart here. Here's a chart of like a person that has a lot of disharmony, that has a lot of inner conflict, that has a lot of back and forth. That doesn't mean that this person is unsuccessful. In fact, this person might be even more successful than somebody with a ton of blue lines because they have more to prove. They have more to fight for. They have more to push themselves against. Now, this is a picture of a chart of somebody that's super harmonious, doesn't come into much conflict in their life. I find that people like this, when there's the littlest bit of conflict, littlest most bit of disharmony, they crack. They break under pressure. They cannot handle it. People with a bunch of disharmonious aspects will step up to the plate. They are used to the conflict. They are used to the pressure and they will do well under it. People that have a bunch of harmony, it's like a rich person that has to be poor all of a sudden. They don't know how to handle it, right? They don't know how to handle the conflict. And a lot of times when I see charts like this with like one bad aspect, 2 bad aspects, their life is completely and utterly, like the theme of their life is just that one bad aspect, and they forget about all of the good ones that they have because they don't know how to deal with conflict. They don't know how to deal with disharmony. There are more aspects, there are minor aspects, and you can look at asteroid aspects, you can look at more asteroids, you can look at these kinds of different charts, this kind of different this kind of different that, right? All that stuff. But for the most part, I think now you understand how to read a table birth chart and how to read a circular birth chart, as well as what a birth chart is, if you watched my last video. So before I end this video, I just want to do a little test just to make sure that you understand. I'm going to ask some questions, and based off of these charts, you're going to answer them and hopefully you'll understand how to read it. So let's take Azealia Banks's circular chart. My first question is, what/where is Azealia Banks' Mercury placement? All right. If you answered Mercury in Taurus at 21 degrees in the 12th house, you are correct. Next question. What is Danny DeVito's most prominent aspect? If you answered Mercury in Sagittarius at 10 degrees in the 12th house, trine Pluto in Leo retrograde at 10 degrees, you are correct. It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, very Matilda. Like, I love his writing style so much. That makes sense. He's also a writer and director, guys, if you didn't know. He's very talented. Next question, number 3. What/where is Danny DeVito's Uranus placement? The answer is Uranus retrograde in Gemini at 11 degrees in the 6th house. Next question. What is Azealia Banks's descendant sign? All right, now if you know, this one was a little trickier. Descendant also means 7th house, that is her house cusp ruler, and her 7th house or descendant is at 26 degrees Scorpio. Next question. What sign is ruling Danny DeVito's midheaven? If you answered 18 degrees Libra, you are correct. Okay, next question. Which planet, by aspects only, of Danny DeVito's would be considered the most harmonious? My answer would have to be his Pluto in Leo, because look at all those trines and those sextiles, and there is no harsh aspect. Now, this is not his only fully harmonious planet. I'm pretty sure, yeah, his Sun and his Mars would also, and his Libra midheaven would all be considered very harmonious. So this is by more opinion. His Sun in conjunct Mars can be considered a little bit harsh, and it doesn't have as many positive aspects. Same with his Libra midheaven. It doesn't have as many positive aspects as his Pluto. So I would actually consider by aspect only his Pluto to be his most harmonious, even though retrograde in the 8th house and in Leo was kind of hard. Now, which of Danny DeVito's planets, again, by aspects only, would be considered the least harmonious? And there are 2. I think they're kind of tied here. So which 2? I would consider it to be his Venus and his Saturn, because there's no positive aspects to either. And I think it has a lot to do with the fact that he's kind of short and kind of dumpy looking. You know, Venus and Saturn, it makes sense that those are his least harmonious. They're also both intercepted. One of them's retrograde. So they're just really not harmonious. All right. Thank you so much for sticking it out. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something. I hope you feel like you're walking away from this video having a lot more of a comprehension on how to read your own birth chart, what to look up from here, where to go from here, all that sort of stuff. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope I spoke and explained things in a way that helps you understand and helps you learn. If you have any further questions that I might have not answered, you're always welcome to leave them in the comments. I honestly, and I'm not just saying this, I really love getting comments. Like, I get so excited when I get a new comment. Like, the first thing I do when I check my phone every morning is to see if I got any more comments on YouTube. I really try to respond to almost all of them. I read every single one, and I love and appreciate you guys whenever you comment. It literally means the world to me. Thank you for watching this video. I hope that you enjoyed it. And if you're a more advanced astrologer, I have a video coming for you in the next week or so that is much more advanced. So if you're over this whole beginner astrology stuff, don't worry. I'm still doing advanced videos. But again, if you'd like a birth chart reading from me, I sell them on my website, shainaemily.com. I also have an astrology TikTok, and I have a personal Instagram. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!